bring you glory in all. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you, sir. All right. So we left off the last time I taught in chapter 42 of Genesis. Do you remember kind of what was going on at that point? It's Joseph, brothers. Huh? They go to Egypt. How does Joseph treat them the first time?
Very good.
Calls them thieves.
Well, he should.
He's going to keep one of them. He did keep one of them.
He wants to see his brother Benjamin.
Yeah, he sends him back, says, do not come back unless your brother, the youngest brother, comes with you. He puts all the money in their sack, if you remember. Kind of, and we talked a little bit about this, but before we kind of get into the rest of this, Joseph's heart in this whole matter, do you think there was ever revenge in his heart?
He could have gone to a lot more greater lengths to show if there was.
I think it's only human to have a number of different feelings, thoughts about everything you're going through, but it doesn't necessarily define his overall stance.
Yeah.
I always wondered why he asked Simeon, kept Simeon behind. If he wasn't the one that treated Joseph the worst, I just don't know. But, you wonder why he chose that brother to stay in prison longer. Yeah.
Probably because of that reason, and try to just give him a small glimpse of what Joseph has gone through himself.
2 years is what I understand, right? He was
Where'd my coffee go?
Simeon?
No, in 2 years.
Did it disappear?
Two ways.
My coffee? Someone stole my coffee back there. Did someone do it? Someone move my coffee? I can't teach without coffee in my hand.
I had to taste it first. It's not poisonous.
Okay, appreciate you, cupbearer. And the reason I asked that, I went to lunch with a friend of mine, and he asked me that question, if I thought that Joseph had any kind of revenge in your heart. And like you said, we don't know. We're not told that he did. But he's still human, and part of him might have had a little bit of that. But if he had it, he reserved it. He really kind of brought it in, and we get a glimpse of his heart later whenever he finally does reveal his brothers. And so we'll get more into that as we go along, but it's just something to think about. And just remember, these are men, regular, and it's very possible those urges could have came in. Satan could have came in and tried to get him to do something along those lines. But he and David are one of the two, people, is it David or Daniel? Daniel, sorry, that almost were like flawless in their testimony, or at least that's what's been recorded. Okay, I say come careful there because I know we're not, but their character was like just above reproach. Okay, so I keep that in mind kind of as we go along. So let's start with chapter 43 and let's read it. Who would like to read? Let's see here. How much section do we want to go? Let's go 1 through 10 first.
Now the famine was severe in the land, so it came about when they had finished eating the grain which they had brought from Egypt, that their father said to them, "Go back, buy us a little food." Judah spoke to him, however, saying, "The man solemnly warned us, you shall not see my face unless your brother is with you. If you send our brother with us, we will go down and buy good food. But if you do not send him, we will not go down. For the man said to us, you will not see my face unless your brother is with you." Then Israel said, "Why did you treat me so badly by telling the man whether you still had another brother?" But they said, "The man questioned particularly about us and our relatives, saying, 'Is your father still alive? Have you another brother?' So we answered his questions. Could we possibly know that he would say, 'Bring your brother down'?" Judah said to his father Israel, "Send the lad with me, and we will arise and go, that we may live and not die, we as well as you and our little ones. I myself will be surety for him. You may hold me responsible for him. If I do not bring him back to you and set him before you, then let me bear the blame before you forever. For if we had not delayed, surely by now we could have returned twice.
Okay, so we mentioned Simeon. He's in prison. We know enough time has passed to where they are now kind of running out of food. They could have traveled this road several times, what he just said, and poor Simeon's over there in prison this whole time. I mean, I have to think that was kind of on their minds, or at least on his dad's mind, thinking of things that were going on. But they've now gone through everything that they have, and
How much time has gone by, you think? A couple years?
They can travel, what, 20, 25 miles a day, maybe?
yeah, it's probably a year or so, because we know that they're still in the famine, and when they finally come, when the family comes to Egypt, there are still a couple years within the famine because of the 7 years. So maybe about a year is what I'm thinking. Could be less, I don't know. But anyway, so this time though is very interesting. Who was the first person that stood up to stand up for little Benjamin? Remember? Reuben. What did Reuben pledge?
His own child.
Yeah, he pledged his kids. Judah, on the other hand, he pledged his own life. Very interesting, because we know that the Messiah comes from the line of Judah. This is the first time of substitutionary engagement that we're seeing from someone in this family. I pledge my life instead of his for protection of his own, kind of a deal. And that theme we see goes through Jesus. Kind of an interesting play there. Okay, but it is, and Jacob takes it differently this time because of his attitude. And he still doesn't like it, but he does see the heart of Judah. Because Judah is now becoming the head of the family, like taking the place of the firstborn. We'll see that again a little bit later also. So he is taking things up upon himself. He puts himself, I put on here on the chopping block, and takes full responsibility. So let's read how Jacob responds. Let's read 11 through 15. Somebody? Just read if you got it. Go ahead, Robert.
Then their father Israel said to them, "If it must be, then do this. Put some of the best products of the land in your bags and take them down to the man as a gift. A little balm and a little honey, some spices and myrrh, some pistachio nuts and almonds. Take double the amount of silver with you, for you must return the silver that was put back into the mouths of your sacks. Perhaps it was a mistake. Take your brother also and go back to the men at once. And may God Almighty grant you mercy before the man, so that he will let your other brother and Benjamin come back with you. As for me, I am bereaved, I am bereaved."
Go ahead.
So then the men took the gifts and
No. Yeah, just finish that one.
took the gifts and double the amounts of silver, and Benjamin also. They hurried down to Egypt and presented themselves to Joseph.
Okay. So Jacob finally relents, and he says, okay, but here's what you're going to do. He starts loading the cart up, almost like a bride, which is we're going to try to butter this guy up because I don't want anything happening to my youngest son. He goes, so we're going to do whatever we can. We're going to try to buy him. And so he actually sends some of the best produce of their land. It was balm, honey, aromatic gum, myrrh, pistachios, and almonds. I mean, some of the best things of the land. Double the money. He goes, no, you're not just sending back what you was brought back. We're going to double it and give it back to him. Okay? So we're going to make sure we are not considered thieves. We are not considered spies. He's making every effort that he possibly can to ensure the goodwill of his kids.
I do have a question about that. I just thought that was interesting because they apparently have an abundance of those items. And it's a famine. This is what, the second year. So they weren't destitute. They just didn't have grain, I guess.
They didn't have grain. Everything else, and what's funny is a lot of this stuff you could actually keep for a while. So they had kind of had stored up, but the grain was nowhere. So they had to go to Egypt for grain. And what's funny, they had animals. So they could actually eat meat. They just couldn't make anything else out of it, So, yeah, bread's important now. We got to add it.
What's they feed their livestock?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, and if there's a drought, there's not much for them to eat. So what was that, Doug? No? Okay. Very important, sir. So let's read on. He does say a little prayer, which I think is very interesting. And it's also good to note that Moses uses his name Israel in this, kind of showing his faith, showing him, his trust in God, because he is finally getting to that point, like, I'm going to just trust the Lord in this kind of a deal. And then he reaches out and recognizes, and the name actually is El Shaddai as the one that's in control. So we do see his faith kind of growing in this matter.
Although he's still sin, why did you bother to tell him that you had a little brother?
Yeah, exactly. He's like, why did you tell him that stuff? You could have lied, God, come on, guys. You know how I feel about this. So let's read 16 through 25. Who'd like to read that? Vicky, you want to read it?
And Joseph saw Benjamin with them. He said to the steward of his house, "Take these men to my house, slaughter an animal, and prepare dinner. They are to eat with me at noon." The man did as Joseph told him and took the men to Joseph's house. Now the men were frightened when they were taken to his house. They thought, "We were brought here because of the silver that was put back into our sacks the first time. He wants to attack us and overpower us and seize us as slaves and take our donkeys." So they went up to Joseph's steward and spoke to him at the entrance to the house. "Please, sir," they said, "we came down here the first time to buy food. But at the place where we stopped for the night, we opened our sacks, and each of us found his silver, the exact weight, in the mouth of the sack. So we have brought it back with us. We have also brought additional silver with us to buy food. We don't know who put our silver in our sacks." "It's all right," he said. "Don't be afraid. Your God, the God of your father, has given you treasure in your sacks. I received your silver." Then he brought Simeon up to them. The steward took the men into Joseph's house, gave them water to wash their feet, and provided fodder for their donkeys. They prepared their gifts for Joseph's arrival at noon because they had heard that they were to eat there.
Okay. So kind of an interesting little thing here. So Joseph's getting ready to meet his younger brother, Benjamin, who he hasn't seen yet. And he orders a banquet to be prepared for them. And what he is trying to do for good, they in turn look at this, they have no idea what's going on, and they immediately think of, oh no, revenge. He's getting us back for the iniquities that we've done, or God's the one getting iniquities back on us because of what we have done to our younger brother. They immediately just went to the bad. I think that's pretty funny, because don't we do that too in our own lives? When things happen, what's that? They felt guilty, yeah. We talked about that last time. How guilt will just eat us alive if we don't deal with it. And this is what's going on in them. That's because that's all they can think about. I mean, imagine what their lives must have been this whole time with that in their heads.
They know they deserve punishment. They're just like, when is it going to come?
Yeah, they've been waiting. Yeah. So I think it's a very good lesson that, guilt is something that we need to deal with, however it may be, and I think Bible's very clear that we are to get right with one another, even before we come to the Lord. He goes, if you have something with your brother, go deal with it, because it's going to impact the vertical relationship if the horizontal is broken. And this is kind of what's going on. They're not seeing the big picture here yet. So something good to take out of that.
Which God did, when the servant speaking, which one did he use? Just as
Elohim. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I was looking at that. Every time you see the word God, capital G, is Elohim. When you see Lord with all capital letters, that's Yahweh. Yeah. And really, if you pull up the Legacy Standard Bible, it will use the term Yahweh instead of Lord. That way you know. It's very interesting. Dr. Reagan showed that version to me. So what Joseph does is he's preparing this feast for them. He's actually going to kind of really bless them beyond all measures. They were afraid. Servants tried to extol them. He said, look, don't worry. It was God who's the one that gave you all that stuff. So he didn't even take credit for what he had done, because I'm sure he was following the Lord's lead. He brings Simeon back out. That had to have been a nice little reunion there. And I'm sure Simeon was very pleased about all this. I'm surprised they didn't go into his reaction of seeing his brothers. Okay. Anyway, now they're getting ready for a feast. So let's go into 26 through 34. Who would like to read that one? Everybody's going to get an opportunity to read today, probably. Chris?
I can do it.
Okay.
When Joseph came home, they brought in into the house to him the present that they had with him and bowed down to him to the ground. And he inquired about their welfare and said, "Is your father well? The old man of whom you spoke, is he still alive?" They said, "Your servant, our father, is well. He is still alive." And they bowed their heads and prostrated themselves. And he lifted up his eyes and saw his brother Benjamin, his mother's son, and said, "Is this your youngest brother of whom you spoke to me? God be gracious to you, my son." Then Joseph hurried out, for his compassion grew warm for his brother, and he sought a place to weep, and he entered his chamber and wept there. Through where?
34.
Okay. Then he washed his face and came out, and controlling himself, he said, "Serve the food." They served him by himself, and them by themselves, and the Egyptians who ate with him by themselves, because the Egyptians could not eat with the Hebrews, for that is an abomination to the Egyptians. And they sat before him, the firstborn according to his birthright, and the youngest according to his youth. And the men looked at one another in amazement. Portions were taken to them from Joseph's table, but Benjamin's portion was 5 times as much as any of theirs, and they drank and were merry with him.
Very interesting. What are some things that kind of make you wonder what's going on here?
Yeah, seated in order of their birth.
Oh, yeah. Okay, statistically speaking, that was almost, impossible to do the first time. So why did Joseph do that?
Give him a little hint of who he is.
He's playing mind games.
Maybe. Yeah. No, yeah. I have to think he's trying to, he is playing with them, and he's maybe giving them a little hint to go, hey, there's something else is going on here. Pay attention, kind of a deal. Because even the fact that they would call on and say, "Is the God of your father," that's a clue, because they worshiped many gods back then. But they specifically said, "The God of your father," Elohim, kind of a deal. Also kind of clues in a little bit, I think. Some may disagree with that. But he's also, this isn't the first time he asked about his father. So he keeps repeating this question. And so I'm like, in my mind, I have to think those guys are going, why is our dad so important to this dude? So he's asking these family questions. He's putting them in birth order. He's doing all these things to kind of maybe clue in a little bit to see if they get it. And really, I don't think they got it because they were so focused on something else. And in our lives, I think God may be even trying to clue us in on some things, but we're so focused on other things that we think are important. And God's like, that ain't nothing, man.
It reminds me much of even the Messianic plan, and you just get these minds that they just couldn't have fathomed that Joseph could have gotten to where he was.
Yeah.
It just blew their paradigm.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and what's funny is when they were bowing down to him, that was fulfillment again of the prophecy that was foretold to them by him. Okay, so all of these actions are being displayed right here. And then the exciting thing is he sees his younger brother, and I can't imagine their thought. I'm going to give him 5 times the amount to what you're going to get, and they just load up his plate, man, just full of food. I have to think they kind of were like, what in the world is going on here? And we're in a birth order. He gets 5 times the food.
He went in private to weep, but he has to oh, this is your brother, and then just disappears.
Yeah. He has to keep his composure, so he hides himself. He does this kind of again later. But yeah, very odd thing that's going on here. Okay.
I was wondering too what the servants thought about all this. He hadn't revealed, well, we don't know that he revealed any of this to them. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I thought the same thing. Yeah. Yeah. So I don't know if they knew or if, were they converted too, because he never stopped worshiping God. His wife had to have necessarily converted to some degree. Could his servants as well? And it's very odd. I don't know. It's a good question.
I was talking to them when they were at the door, and he was speaking as if, don't worry, just thought it was just also interesting,
Oh,
because
the
he
servant,
knew,
yeah.
the servant knew who his master was and how a good man he was, and that he was gonna take care of them. You know, so,
Yeah.
I wonder what language they were speaking.
Something Egyptian.
If he had spoken in Hebrew, they would have woken up pretty quick.
Yeah. So he had to have a translator. And it said, we know that from previous, things. So yeah, he was doing a pretty good job of hiding himself. So speaking of, him blessing Benjamin, why do you think he did this?
They've been close.
yeah, it's blood brother.
He didn't
Blood.
really get to know him that much.
This was his only blood brother. Okay. And think about this. He's the only innocent one at that table. So he blessed him because of that, I think, was part of it. But I think his blood brother, is a huge piece of that.
How old is Benjamin here?
Probably he was in his early 20s. Maybe could be a little younger than that. Could be in his late teens, but somewhere in that range. Because by the time that that Jacob comes to Jacob, he'd been gone for 22 years, which we'll get to that in a minute. So that kind of gives you an idea, because his brother was probably a baby.
Yeah.
Whenever he left.
Benjamin wouldn't recognize him and go, hey,
Yeah.
is that you? Because he's just too little.
Yeah.
Well, they're serving him wine, so he's at least 21.
Yeah.
Oh, that's funny. What's also kind of prophetic about Benjamin, the first king of Israel would be his descendant. So could have been almost a prophetic sign by God by doing this to show that, hey, this line is going to be from the first king. So I don't know that, but it's interesting. Because in Egypt, a prince or ruler would get 5 times as much as anyone else as a sign of royalty. So just something to think about. Anything else in that chapter before we move on?
Whole strange thing with them eating separately.
So yeah, I put that in here. So because this is going to play key later too. They sat separately because the Egyptians looked down upon Hebrews.
But why? That's what I'm going like, there's only 66 of them. There's nobody.
So why? Yeah, that's a good question. So what were Hebrews? What was their main source of shepherds?
Yeah.
They were shepherds. They did not look favor upon shepherds. Because in Egypt, there's a couple of reasons. One, they were just lower. The only thing that the Egyptians held as higher on the animal side were cattle. If you were sheep herders, you were the low of the low. Because think about what did Israel grow, or Egypt grow this entire time? They were growing grain. I'm sure they probably didn't like a lot of animals being around their stuff, because that was food for them, and it could have hurt their fields and so forth. But they were also just considered low of the low, because that comes into play later whenever the family decides to come. And so Joseph sets aside some land specifically for that reason. He separates them.
It's really interesting. It kind of points back to Cain and Abel.
In what way?
Cain provided a crop where Abel was a shepherd.
Yeah, absolutely. There are some very neat parallels to all this. So, anything else before we move on? 44?
Did Benjamin eat all his food, or did he just...
If he did, he was hurting.
Man beat food.
Said the odds of them sitting in the order of their birth were 1 in 40 million.
1 in 40 million. That's incredible. Yeah, that'd be hard to do. Okay, let's read 1 through 13 of chapter 44. Who'd like to read that? 1 through 13. Okay.
Then he commanded the steward of the house, fill the men's sacks with food, as much as they can carry, and put each man's money in the mouth of his sack, and put my cup, the silver cup, in the mouth of the sack of the youngest, with his money for the grain, as he did as Joseph told him. As soon as the morning was light, the men were sent away on their donkeys. and they had gone only a short distance from the city. Now Joseph said to his steward, follow after the men, and when you overtake them, say to them, why have you repaid evil for good? Is it not from this that my Lord drinks, and by this he practiced divination? You have done evil in doing this. When he overtook them, he spoke to them these words. They said to him, why does my Lord speak such words as these? Far be it from the servants to do such a thing. Behold, the money that we have found in the mouths of your sacks we brought back to you from the land of Canaan. How then could we steal silver or gold from the Lord's house? Whichever your servants has found with it shall die, and we shall also be my Lord's servants. He said, let it be as you say. He who has found it shall be my servant, and the rest of you shall be innocent. Then each man quickly lowered his sack to the ground, and each man opened his sack. And he searched, beginning with the eldest and ending with the youngest. And the cup was found in Benjamin's sack. Then they tore their clothes, and every man loaded his donkey, and they returned to the city.
So this is the final test. And this is probably the reason why Joseph wanted Benjamin here. Because this was going to be a tell-all of their character. Because remember, he was the youngest last time when they were all together, and they basically just sold him out. So now they have their youngest. What are they going to do? Okay, so this was a test to them to see where they were going to do. So, it's funny, 'cause one of the commentators I read, so the first thing Joseph does, he starts putting back all the money back in their sacks again. But this time he puts a silver cup in Benjamin's. And what he said was, this cup was what? What was this cup? Cup of divination. Why would Joseph have a cup of divination? What was it used for? You know?
I don't know, we learned last week we're not supposed to get into divination.
That's a good lesson. I mean, it's definitely of evil ideas. It's fortune telling. It's looking into this, because it wasn't just this small cup. It was more likely a more size of a bowl type of thing, because they would pour water in it and they would use it kind of as a way to look to the future or see things or get some kind of knowledge. So did Joseph do this? No.
But it's there for the position that Joseph holds.
Yeah, exactly. So just because it says this does not mean Joseph did it. He just had it. And he had it sitting here because that's what the position, like what Dan said, the position held. And he said, look, we're just going to put this in there. And it wasn't an ornate thing. It wasn't just some small little thing. This was a big, big deal. Worth lots. Okay? So he throws that into the sack. And I think it's funny that after they leave, he tells the servant to go say exactly what I'm going to tell you. And then their response to him, when they come and stop him and find him, they find the cup. They say, look, whoever has anything, you can kill them. And the rest of us will be your servants. Not even thinking about what they're saying. Where else did we hear that from? Do you remember? You remember who said, hey, you can have whatever, kill whoever may have it? Jacob said this. You remember? With the idol.
The idol.
Yeah, and Rachel had it.
Rachel had a period.
Yeah.
Nope.
Yeah. So it's very interesting.
That's how I remember things, sorry.
It's interesting, the servant's like, no, well, he'll just be a slave and everyone else can go free. He's like,
Yeah.
we can't kill anybody.
Yeah, because that's also kind of telling. It's like, no, he didn't say no. He just says, you know what, we'll do exactly that. We'll just keep the one as a slave, and then the rest of you can go free, kind of a deal. So the servant was even very interesting on his reply.
They didn't try to be free. They said, we will all go back.
Yeah, and they even said, we'll even take the blame. And so their attitudes have changed a lot. Their ways of doing stuff have changed since the beginning. Would you say?
Why'd you take it? I did take it.
Had their attitudes changed, or they're just like, we don't have it, so what do we have to fear?
That's a good question.
Oh, yeah, we don't have it. Look, we didn't take this, dude. If we have this, you can kill whoever's got it, kind of thing. That's how confident they were. Maybe they should say, hey, if we have it, you can really punish us with
words instead of death, maybe.
Yeah, and, I mean, I think there probably was a little bit of that, Brian, but I do think, though, that I think their hearts had changed. And they were willing to go down with them, no matter what. So I do think it was a true heart deal, too. So now we get this other test again, or this thing that's going on, and they look through the sack from oldest to youngest again. And I'm, thinking about that as they're going from the oldest to the young, because the youngest is the one that has it. This whole time they're just going one by one, or it's one person. There's probably multiple sacks per person. Yeah, can you imagine the suspense of what's going on through all of this? Either they were at complete peace because they know they hadn't done anything, or there was a lot of tension and a lot of stress going on as they get closer and closer to Benjamin.
Well, they said they put the silver back in each sack, so the men are seeing, oh man, here's our silver back.
Here's our stuff back.
Right, so they have to kind of think, oh great, we've been set up.
Wonder what else they planted on us.
Yeah. No, it's right.
Scripted. It's like a reality show.
Yeah. So, and now come to find out the youngest was about to be taken. And man, they ripped their clothes. I mean, that is a sign of true anguish of what they were dealing with at this moment. Because you don't just rip your clothes. You rip it because it was something heavy was going on. And man, they knew the issue of what was going on here. Okay, so let's finish up. Let's go 14 through, let's do 14 through 34. Let's finish this chapter here. Okay.
Joseph was still in the house when Judah and his brothers came in, and they threw themselves to the ground before him. Joseph said to them, "What is this you have done? Don't you know that a man like me can find things out by divination? What can we say to my lord?" Judah replied. "What can we say? How can we prove our innocence? God has uncovered your servant's guilt. We are now my servant's slaves, we ourselves and the one who was found to have the cup." But Joseph said, "Far be it from me to do such a thing. Only the man who was found to have the cup will become my slave. The rest of you, go back to your father in peace." Then Judah went up to him and said, "Please, my lord, let your servant speak a word to my lord. Do not be angry with your servant, though you are equal to Pharaoh himself." My lord asked his servants, "Do you have a father or a brother?" And we answered, "We have an aged father, and there's a young son born to him in his old age. His brother is dead, and he is the only one of his mother's sons left, and his father loves him." Then you said to your servants, "Bring him down to me so I can see him for myself." And we said to my lord, "The boy cannot leave his father. If he leaves him, his father will die." But you told your servants, "Unless your youngest brother comes down with you, you will not see my face again." When we went back to your servant, my father, we told him what my lord had said. When our father said, "Go back and buy a little more food," but we said, "We cannot go down. Only if our youngest brother is with us will we go. We cannot see the man's face unless our youngest brother is with us." Your servant, my father, said to us, "You know that my wife bore me 2 sons. One of them went away from me, and I said, 'He has surely been torn to pieces,' and I have not seen him since. If you take this one from me too, and harm comes to him, you will bring my gray head down to the grave in misery. So now, if the boy is not with us when I go back to your servant, my father, and if my father, whose life is closely bound up with the boy's life, sees that the boy isn't there, he will die. Your servants will bring the gray head of our father down to the grave in sorrow." Your servant guaranteed the boy's safety to my father. I said, "If I do not bring him back to you, I will bear the blame before you, my father, all my life. Now then, please let your servant remain here as my lord's slave in place of the boy, and let the boy return with his brother. How can I go back to my father if the boy is not with me? No, do not let me see the misery that would come upon my father."
Mm-hmm. Sir Walter Scott called this plea the most complete pattern of genuine natural eloquence extant in any language. Martin Luther said, "I would give very much to be able to pray before God as well as Judah prayed before Joseph. For this is a perfect pattern of prayer, yes, of the true feeling which should be in prayer." I mean, he pleaded with Joseph. I mean, he retold the whole story again, telling him the details of his father, how it was going to impact his father. He could tell, his heart was being poured out to Joseph at this time. And it was probably the right thing to say to Joseph. Because if the boy was not brought back, it probably literally would have killed Jacob.
Like sorrow or?
Yeah, Absolutely. He was already still mourning Joseph during this time. Don't forget that. And this has been years in the since. He's still mourning Joseph. What happens if he takes the last son of Rachel, his true love?
There's no implication that he's like, if he did that, he's just going to kill himself.
No, not at all. He would be die in sorrow.
Gotcha.
Yes. So think about Judah, though. What was he like prior to all of this? He was a hothead. How did he treat his dad? Do you remember that story? Absolutely. He tried to usurp the throne, basically, if you remember right. So he treated his dad pretty poorly. How's he treating his dad now?
Great honor and respect.
Very. Big change in Judah. So that's pretty key to kind of pay attention to. I mean, he was set right, but he also listened and he was willing to change. And last time he was part of the plan to get rid of Joseph. This time he's like, I'm not going to allow that to happen again. I'm willing to put my own life down for the sake of this boy. Do whatever you want with me. Let him go. We'll see how Joseph reacted to that, because that was huge to him. And that's really, I think, what Joseph wanted to see in all of this. This was the pinnacle of repentance. Kind of interesting. Joseph being a kind of a picture of Jesus, a type of Jesus. We have someone coming to him offering basically forgiveness and coming to him with repentance. So anything else in that before we move on?
None of the other brothers went, yeah, me too. There's that opportunity to join in on the no, you take me because I'm as guilty.
Simeon says, definitely not me.
Yeah.
Anything else before we get into 45? Okay, let's read 45. I'll read 1 through 15. Joseph was no longer able to control himself before all his attendants. So he cried out, "Make everyone go out from my presence." No one remained with Joseph when he made himself known to his brothers. He wept loudly. The Egyptians heard it, and Pharaoh's household heard about it. Joseph said to his brothers, "I am Joseph. Is my father still alive?" His brothers could not answer him because they were dumbfounded before him. Joseph said to his brothers, "Come closer to me." So they came near. Then he said, "I am Joseph, your brother, whom you sold into Egypt. Now do not be upset and do not be angry with yourselves because you sold me here, for God sent me ahead of you to prepare life. For these past 2 years there have been famine in the land, and for 5 more years there will be neither plowing nor harvesting. God sent me ahead of you to preserve you on the earth and to save your lives by a great deliverance. So now it is not you who sent me here, but God. He has made me an advisor to Pharaoh, lord over all his household, and ruler over all the land of Egypt. Now go up to my father quickly and tell him, 'This is what your son Joseph says. God has made me lord of all Egypt. Come down to me, do not delay. You will live in the land of Goshen, and you will be near me, you, your children, your grandchildren, your flocks, your herds, and everything you have. I will provide you with food there, because there will be 5 more years of famine. Otherwise, you would become poor, you, your household, and everyone belongs to you. You and my brother Benjamin can certainly see with your own eyes that I really am the one who speaks to you. So tell my father about all my honor in Egypt and about everything you have seen, but bring my father down here quickly." What a reunion. Can you imagine the brothers' reactions to this? I'd imagine some of them probably fell over. Just lost control. They're like, what in the world is going on here? But what a reunion it is, though. It brings him to tears, so much so he is now able to fully I think it's tears of joy of being able to reveal himself to his brothers. I'm sure he's been wanting to do this all along, but he had to make sure of some things. You know, and what's also interesting to me is, who did he give credit to for everything that happened? God. This is why I don't believe he really had too much revenge in his heart. Because he, in his mind, he always knew this was God's work, God's plan. He was following the Lord. And God had a purpose in all of this. You know, and I'm sure that when his brothers came the first time and they bowed down to him, that dream popped in his head and he goes, fulfillment. God is working through all of this. I get it now, maybe. Maybe it was then it clued in him, but he never lost his faith from what we can determine. But what I find interesting, if God was truly involved in all this, why did he put his brothers through the test then?
I think it's just like when, as an adult, I mean, as a parent, you know, when you see your child truly sorry, you know, and asking for forgiveness, there's a connection. It's much easier to forgive if they're truly sorrowful. I think all that, you know, combined. And I think too, I was thinking about what a relief all of those brothers must. I mean, it must have just been a gushing relief, because you know they've carried this guilt with them all these years, and not only is he claiming who he is, and they get to reunite with him, but they see God's work and how he orchestrated all that. I mean, that's gotta have been a big relief to them, because they're thinking, okay, well, we did do something wrong, but God has made something so good out of it. You know?
Yeah.
Tough love.
It is. I mean, it is kind of tough love. But he went with caution with his brothers, even though he fully trusted God. And that's kind of an interesting concept to think. That we can be, God is completely in control of things, but we can still be kind of cautious with certain things in our lives to protect ourselves, or, you know, whatever the case may be.
Wise as serpents, harmless as doves.
Yeah. So he was kind of doing the same thing. But I do believe a lot of this was kind of their repentance, getting them to that understanding of what they have done and seeing all this stuff that was built up. Because when they finally poured out and repented of this thing, it had to have been a huge just release. What is that like with our walk with God and coming to Jesus? I mean, it's that kind of repentance and laying things down before him that we have got to understand. Let him have it, kind of a deal. Or we continue walking this life with all of these guilts in our heads and in our hearts.
It's like the Pilgrim's Progress when he drops the load of sin down.
Down on it, yeah, absolutely. So
This is another huge parallel to Jesus' life here, because Jesus was rejected by all the tribes of Israel.
Absolutely. So pretty. This is a pretty deep story. So don't discount it. You know, really kind of take it in.
Try to think of, like, if he had, when they first saw them, you know, the alternative would be, it's like, hey guys, it's me. Remember the guy you thought was dead? You know, right off the bat, you know, how things would have played out differently if, oh, you did pretty well for yourself. Oh, can we stay with you? Kinda, I don't know how it would have gone.
Yeah.
It wouldn't have been, you know.
It would have been a little different.
Joseph, we always told you were going to go far back.
We believe that dream. You know? We were kidding back then. Well, but also keep in mind, there's two different views to the story here. You have Joseph's view. You have the brother's view. There's always two sides to a story. The brothers' views were always looking at this in a negative way. We're being punished. This is what's going on. God's getting us now. We're deserving and all this kind of stuff. And Joseph comes along and goes, guys, let me tell you something. God was at work the entire time to you. It wasn't you who sold me into slavery. It was God who did this to prepare for things. So when we're going through our lives and we're going through struggles and we're going through issues, there is another side to this story that you don't necessarily know about, that we don't know about.
Yeah, Joseph didn't play the victim.
Yeah.
Like, oh, what could happen to me? Woe is me.
No.
He's like,
Well, and put yourselves in the brother situation. They didn't fully get the big picture of what God was doing in this. When we're going through our struggles and our trials in life, we don't know what God is doing in the situation all the time. God is bigger than our our trivials and our trials. But he is working them for good no matter what. This is a huge part of this story. So don't miss that. So when we're going through things, just keep in mind there is another aspect of the story that God has not shown me yet. But I have a feeling at some point it will be revealed why. It may not be here. It may be whenever we get to be in his presence. But all those pictures and things will come to fruition. So.
You know, Ryan, going back to Joseph and Daniel being these two characters that nothing negative really was said about them, I think they were spared because of their hearts. I do think they, of course, as humans, went through a number of different emotions, but it's much like God tells Cain, he says, look, sin's crouching at the door ready to master you. You've got to master it. And so I think that they managed to master these emotions and the turmoil they went through and everything, and that's why they were spared any negative comment.
Yeah, that's good.
But it doesn't mean as humans that we can't have these emotions,
Yeah.
struggles.
Well, and I tried to write down, can you imagine how his brothers must have felt at this revelation? Relief? I'm sure they went through this stages of emotion, because I'm sure it was relief. Potentially probably could have got a little mad. Why did you do this to us? Confusion was probably a part of this whole thing. And then finally kind of love whenever he finally kind of explains everything.
He punked them all.
Yeah. What's that?
A little bit of fear.
Yeah, fear too.
And now what's he gonna do?
This is my brother. What's he gonna do? Yeah.
Wait till we tell
No,
Dad.
you see that at the end of the Genesis where Joseph dies, and it's at the end. I mean, we haven't got there yet, but they're scared after Joseph dies, what's going to happen.
Yeah. No,
Or
absolutely.
Jacob dies, I'm sorry.
Jacob dies. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, because Jacob, Israel doesn't know that the brothers did this, and now that what is Dad gonna say? Wait till your father comes.
Yeah,
Jacob still thinks he was torn apart by an animal.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
You don't hear that in the story.
You don't. That's never been revealed.
Remember how they backtrack that one?
Dad, you won't believe what
Well,
happened.
so think of this as when we understand God's sovereign control over everything, it should produce an attitude of graciousness, forgiveness, acceptance. It should change our attitude in everything. His sovereign control over everything. As I've said last time, he's sovereign control over the political realm, world leader realm. He's control over everything on this world that we think is bad. He's at work. And we can live in peace through all of it. And as Christians, we should. Because when we don't live that way, what is that saying about how our trust in God?
I think even more than peace, and this comes up over and over in the life of Joseph, but when you have that confidence and you have that vision, Joseph was faithful at every step. Whatever situation he was in, he was faithful in the knowledge and light of God's sovereignty. And so it was more than just peace. It was proactive. I'm just going to do the right thing.
Do the right
leave
thing.
results to God.
Do what God tells me to do. Yeah, that's good. And I wrote down some things. There's no need to be bitter, even though we have emotions and we're going to feel them. I understand that, okay? But when we lose a job, when we lose a family member, actions that maybe have happened to you that were wrong, things not going the way you think they should, political landscape doesn't go your way, all that stuff shouldn't matter as far as making us worry. If God is the one sovereignly in control, that means something big is coming and he's working for this good. Okay?
I think too, one item is like, all this happening, he was giving them an opportunity to think about, what happened here? And giving them a chance to end up like how it ends. Hey, this is what's going on, this is what we told my dad and all the things. So giving them a chance to, I guess, I don't want to say it's repent, but an opportunity to think and be active and react and make things right,
Yeah. That's good.
So, like, I remember having a conversation with our chaplain at work recently about the fires and all that in New Mexico. And I go, she said something about, how's your mom over there? I was like, she's fine. So I go, she goes, are you concerned? I went, no, I'm not concerned. I said, I just don't get it. Like, God sees that happening. Why didn't he do anything? You know, we were just having that dialogue, and she's like, yeah. I'm like, hey, God, you see that? Why don't you send some rain over? Anyway, I was just being honest, and she goes, well, that's a valid question. She goes, but back to the opportunity. She's like, he doesn't work that way, and you got to remember the opportunity that you have to get involved with him in that, whatever that is, right? Money or whatever you're going to do for that scenario, and how are you going to respond to it and help, other people. So anyway, I thought, okay, good point, go on. I got to get back to work. But anyways, I knew all that, but the way she said it, I'm like, okay.
It worked. I mean, I heard somebody was talking bad about me, and that somebody came around, hey, so and so said this is bad about you, and at first, you're like, well, it's not cool. I mean, whatever. And then you can't unhear that. So you can't unhear that, and so now you got to work with this fella, and you have this knowledge, and what do you do with it? I mean, do you seek revenge? You say, I'm going to show him. You confront him. And I just, the next day, the lady came up to me and said, so what do you think? I go, look, gossip's a sin. He might have had a reason for feeling what he did, and I think we all should have the freedom and flexibility to be frustrated and voice things. I'm not going to hold it personally against him. And it was amazing. Like the next few days, this guy was super nice to me, and but it's just what do you do with it when just like we talk about Jacob and the story here is what do you do with that knowledge and how do you behave? God knows. God's going to judge you based on that.
Well, and the last one to that point, it's a kind of, some of the things is reconciliation is possible when there's forgiveness, and forgiveness is possible when we recognize God's sovereignty. So,
Yeah.
it's a big deal.
It is a big deal.
So, he does this, he hugs his brother's neck, they weep on their shoulders, he kisses them all, he weeps over them, and in the last part it says that his brothers talked with him. This is in verse 15. That's kind of an interesting little phrase there. Because the last time that they really saw him, when they were all together as a family, what was their response to him? They wouldn't greet him. They wouldn't talk to him. They wouldn't say shalom to him. They were so mad at him. That's what it said. Now we get to the part where now they talk to him. So there has been this full kind of reconciliation amongst the brothers. Very, very powerful here. We're going to stop there.